What is up, ninjas? My name is Sam World, and today we're going to be looking at a brand new wavetable synthesizer called Faceplant by Kilohertz. And we're going to ask ourselves the question, is it worth the left kidney? Is it worth your left thumb, the left nut? Because the money has to come from somewhere. I don't know how the hell I'm able to afford all this stuff. So I actually did end up buying Faceplant for you guys, and I've used it for about a day. So that's why it's called First Impressions, not Expert Impressions. So if my sounds suck out of the get-go, I've only used it for a day. That's my excuse. Since Faceplant is a wavetable synthesizer, we are going to have to compare it to Serum, just like we compared Serum to Massive, another great wavetable synthesizer, which Serum obviously was inspired by and did way better. So the point of Faceplant should be, if it's going to be competing with Serum, it has to be better than Serum, and it has to offer stuff Serum doesn't have in order for it to be worth a left kidney. So we are going to be looking at the workflow of it. We're going to be looking at all that, as that is important to me. Now, when it comes to pricing, it can get a little bit confusing, so let me demystify it for you. Before Faceplant, Kilohertz was making plugins, effects plugins like compressors, distortion, EQs, delays, reverbs, very basic ones with non-fancy graphics. They just wanted good stuff that sounded good with basic graphics, and they're great. So when you're coming in to buy Faceplant, they're essentially giving you the options of doubling down and buying the Kilohertz Toolbox Professional, which comes with all those effects. So the first year, which is just Faceplant, will give you 169 Faceplant, the left kidney. You're gonna get essentially a 3-band EQ, a chorus, delay, gain limiter, and stereo as VST. So you're actually gonna be getting the plugins as well, which you can utilize outside of the synth if you want to. Now, as you move up to the $200 perks, then you access the compressor, the distortion, a filter, a phaser, and a reverb. So obviously you're gonna want to go with that, or you're not gonna have a reverb inside of Faceplant. And finally, we're gonna go up to the big boy perk, where you're gonna essentially cut your left ear off and sell it, and hopefully it's a good mixing ear, because I'll buy it. And that one's going to give you all the other cool effects like a transgate, transient shaper, and all that. What you have to keep in mind again is that they made plugins before this. They made plugins like this, like a phase distortion, and those are the ones that you're going to be able to open up inside of Faceplant, and that's what they're called, their snapping compatibility, and that is very powerful depending on how you look at it. Now, when we are actually inside of the synth and we left click on the effects sections, you're going to notice here all my effects. This is essentially what you're paying for, depending on which perk you buy. If you buy the 169 version, which is the left kidney, you're going to see less effects, okay? If you buy the 350 version, you're going to see more effects. So if you have, like, let's say the Faturator, which is a plugin they're known for, kind of like a sausage fattener with a little bit more spice to it, then you're going to see it here. And this is what they consider the snap-in feature, that a lot of the effects they have made before Faceplant can be put in, and they're kind of sized down to fit, so you have a bit more better workflow. You don't have to get out of Faceplant to alter the sound, mix the sound, do whatever you have to do with the sound. Now, keep in mind, when you buy this, and if you have never bought a Kilohertz plugin before, you're also going to have access to the VST plugin itself. So if I look up my Faturator and I open that up, I'm going to have a standalone version of it like this, which I can also utilize. That is what you're paying for, the big money for, and it's up to you to decide if it's worth it. Let's say you go with the very basic 169 version and you don't have a reverb. Are you willing to exit Faceplant and put a third-party reverb out of it, like so, and ruin the workflow a little bit in order to pay less for it? Or maybe you just don't like the Kilohertz reverb, or you don't like certain things. That is a question you must ask yourself when you are purchasing Faceplant, because that is the difference in pricing. It's just the effects you will have access to. The generator section of Faceplant is going to be pretty simple to use, and this is where your sound design journey is usually going to begin. What we're going to do is left click there, guys, where we're going to choose an analog generator, and this is going to be our first oscillator that we're going to be able to open up. You're going to be able to open up as many as you want inside of Faceplant, and it looks nice and neat, as you're going to see as we develop and go more into it. Now, when you open up the analog, you're going to have access to the standard saw, square, triangle, sine. You are going to have the standard sync. You're going to have a PWM pulse width with the square attached right there, which again a lot of analog synths had. We're going to have our level here, our amplitude. We're going to have our pitch settings. Our harmonic is going to be the octave. You are going to get a visual 8. The faster, the higher something plays, the faster the wave moves. So that's why you see a bunch of waves starting to appear, more squares, more frequency. They appear more frequent. And then, again, you're just going to have access to the phase, all the standard stuff, and then a coarse pitch or your shift in the way this is called. To the right of that here, you're going to have your unison. So if we want to create a super saw, which is the first sound I ever created in a synth, I just want to see how fast I can do it. 8 voices, detune. Let's add a bit of release. Now, I like the way this is set up because, again, in Serum, what you would have to do in order to essentially do with this, where you have a supersaw like that, but it's actually in mono, you would have to go into the global section and go into the width and push down. If you didn't read the manual, you wouldn't know that existed. Okay, so that is going to be a big difference between Faceplant and Serum, in the sense that we're going to be able to have access to that right here. There's no hidden menus we have to go into. It's all going to be set up right there. So what I'm going to do is use that spread, and the spread, what it does in any synth is it's going to pan symmetrically to the left, to the right, an equal amount of voices, and detune them to get the supersaw sound. Now if I give more release and I play chords, very easy to do. Now if we go one back to one voice and get a square, we have the nice square there, square bass and whatnot. So this is the basic analog waveform. You're going to have access to all that, as you can see. Now, as we move along, guys, we are going to have access to a noise generator, and let's lower the gain on that a bit. The noise generator, you're going to have access to just pretty much 3 different kinds of noises. From looks like colored noise, standard noise we can utilize there. We are going to have here, like, I guess, big crush noise, which has a tonality to it, so it does have a key. Okay, and then we're going to have another sort of noise, smooth noise. To make kind of like add like landscape or to a pad, to just give that nice, create some soundscapes with. We are going to have access to a stereo. And then we're going to have the seed here, which I'm assuming it's going to have to deal with as I'm moving between notes, how stable or random the noise is going to react to that noise. And then, of course, we have our ADSR settings there with that. As we move here, we are going to have a sampler where we can load up any sample, and I believe they have some that we can load up by default. Now, let's see how easy it is to load up just a standard vocal shot. I have a pack here, and let's just look up vocal. I know you guys can't see it, but let's do a vocal shot in A. Put it there, and it's that simple to do. Okay, the cool thing here that I like about this sampler is the fact that we do have a root here that we can set. So I know this is an A, so I'm going to set it there. Okay, and the cool thing I like about this sampler over the Serum one, the Serum noise section, is the fact that we can loop it, so that way we don't get that nasty like do-it vibe, but more of a ping pong where we can do that, so that way we have this thing repeating over, and now and again, you get some really nice settings with that. And I like this. You can switch phase as well in here. I bet you can probably FM with it as well. So some cool stuff that we will possibly look into. To the right of that here, we're going to have the different loop settings and whatnot. But that is essentially the sampler. It reminds me a lot of the Ableton one, and that is a plus in my opinion. Now, as we move along, we're going to have the wavetable. And the wavetable is going to be, again, similar to the one in Serum, but just a bit different looking. So we're going to have access to all these wavetables. And let's load up an FM one if we can, like a complex FM. Now, over here, we're going to have a frame, which is your wavetable position. Okay, pretty simple. We got 32 minutes, similar to the analog, and essentially our attack release decay settings underneath there. Now, I'm going to close all of this up now. Now, to the right of that, we do have distortion filters and utilities, which we're going to use to kind of make the semi-modular synth into what we wanted. So let's get into how we would go about in FMing and stuff like that, which is something a lot of people are going to want to do with a synth in this caliber. So if I have a saw here, let's say, or let's go with a sine. If I want to FM, what I have to do is I have to open up another generator, and it could be another analog, a sampler, a wavetable. And what I have to do is I have to feed this into the pitch of this guy here. So instead, in Serum, we would have to go into the warp and go into FM mode. Here, we have to do it like so. We're going to pick a wavetable. Let's just do like another FM one, a complex FM. We'll pick it here. Okay, you notice you can't really hear anything. Just the sub of the sine. Now what I have to do is click on this guy here to set up my modulation, and now I can access phase modulation, FM modulation, which is frequency modulation, and amplitude modulation, which is amplitude is usually going to mean volume in a way, the how big the highest point of our wave. So if I set this to my shift here, this is going to give me access to the FM section, and as I feed it in, you're going to start to notice the waveform changes. Now, just click there to exit out of that. Now, the next thing is I can use this level to control that as well. Or I could use the feed here that we are doing. It's up to you, but that's going to be things. We can change the harmonic or the octave. And now we can move it. And again, it's going to be up to you to decide how to do that, but that's how we would access FM, AM, and pulse width modulation settings. Again, there's a lot of wavetables for us to access through that, so I'll play a couple before we move on to the next section, which is going to be the modulators section of Faceplant. But the generator section, you're going to be able to do a lot more, but I want to show the main oscillators that we're going to have access to. So if we go here with, like, let's say a wavetable and we just go through some of them, these are how they're going to sound like. We do have saw to triangle, which are going to be kind of like the analog ones. We have saws here that are going to be like melting saw. And again, wavetable synths are good at making wubs, making sounds with movement, and that's what we are looking at these wavetables for. We want the wavetables to sound good. We want them to move over time if possible. So if we put like an LFO on that, we're going to be able to wub it and whatnot. You can add release. Okay, we are going to have this band limit here, which is sort of like a low pass filter for the wavetable, just to make it a little less busy and less high. What I mean is less wavetable sounding. You can definitely get rid of it. So great for making evolving pads, making wubs. So this is going to be the generator section of Faceplant. Again, first impressions, I haven't really dived into the other stuff, but I wanted to show you guys how that would work when you first enter the synth to make your first sounds in it. Now, the next thing we're going to have, guys, is the modulator section. This is where you're going to find like your LFOs, your step sequencers, stuff like that. So when we click here, we can see that Faceplant offers a standard envelope, an LFO, a random, which is going to be sort of like a random step sequencer, probably a MIDI, so we can apply velocity changes to stuff, which I don't find myself doing it a lot, as I find a lot of people don't mess with velocity on synths that much unless they're making like very orchestral or very acoustical stuff. And then we are going to have utilities here, which we're not going to get into, as I really don't know what they do. However, we're going to look at the main things most people are going to find themselves using, and that's going to be the envelope, the LFO, and then we'll also look at the random. Now, when we open up the envelope, it's going to be a very simple envelope like so. In order to route it to stuff, you're going to have to click on the plus, and this is going to show you where you could route it. So let's say I want to make this sound a lot punchier. I could set it to my shift, which is my coarse pitch knob like we would have in Serum. Move that to the right. Okay, we're going to now get out of that. Click lower sustain, lower attack, lower decay. Now I can lower this down, but that's how it's going to work, my pitch. I could click here and make it unipolar, bipolar, and inverted, so it's up to you how you want it. Most envelopes are going to be unipolar, however, going in one direction rather than two directions, but you do have the option to switch between them. We move from that to the LFO. We all know the Serum LFO was the shit. Like, it was literally like one of the best synths where the LFO was just so easy to use and so easy to do stuff with it. So as we open it up, we can see we have more of a standard analog style of LFO, where we're going to have our saw, our sine, a square, and a triangle. When we have access to these guys, we're going to be able to sync them, and the way the sync works here is pretty different than what you would find yourself using in other synths. You're going to have to set this to however you want, but as long as you know division, you should be fine. So if you have 2 to 16, that's going to be 1/8, obviously. 4 to 16, that's going to be 1/4. So again, it's just mathematics, very simple. So we could route this to stuff like maybe the frame, which is going to be our wavetable position. Now, the next thing we're going to be able to do is mess with the phase of the sound. So if you have a saw in here to modulate, you're going to go up and then straight down. But you can also start it like so, so you have more of a reverse, kind of like going up. However, we don't have the inverted saw, which is going to give us that dead mouse sound. Sadly, I feel like we're going to have to program that. We have access to a square where, again, you can get it out of phase. But a square is going to give you more of like low, up, low, up. Now, remember, this is going to be bipolar, so if you want it unipolar, you just set it there, so it's going in one direction. Now, the thing here we're going to have is a retrigger, so every time you press a new note, it starts from the beginning, so that way the LFO always stays in sync with what you're doing with your keyboard. And then we also have a one-shot mode, which, as we all know, Serum's one-shot to do Just simple, like kind of envelope-y kind of stuff. Now, this is where Faceplant kind of goes down a little bit in my opinion, because it's not as fluid as Serum, but they do something good. If we want to make, again, those custom LFO shapes that you saw in Serum, you're going to have to click this pencil button. Now, this is what I like. It brings out this nice screen where we can actually even make that even bigger so we can do intricate stuff. So, for instance, let's say I want to make a sound where I want like it to do like some weird wobbles or something, then I could start to program that. It is latched onto my my point here, as you can see. I'm sure there's a way that we could possibly switch like the axis, like instead of 8/8 we have like 16/16, so we can get more intricate with it. It's totally up to you how you want to kind of program that, but that's good to see there. The one thing I don't like, however, about this is as the curve editor is opened, I'm hitting a key, I cannot play a sound until I click here. And now if I want to edit, I'm going to come back and I'm trying to get, again, I'm clicking the button to see what that's going to do, but I can't get that response. That's one thing that let me down about the curve editor. Maybe they did it for a reason. But for me, again, that just impedes workflow and it's kind of annoying to have to go back and click. However, if I want to do something crazy, again, like just some weird stuff, like, and I have to double click on this line as well. I can't click here to create points. I'm clicking as much as I can. So it's a bit clumpy to use for me. I'm trying to click. There we go. We have that. Click there. There we go. But if I click here, I cannot make those points instantaneous. So workflow is a bit weird. But again, I could do stuff like this. We're going to slow this down to maybe 16/16. So it's like a bar long. And it's going to look like this. Check it out. So, in one-shot mode. Okay, so that's the LFO section. I don't see a way to load up like custom LFOs, like maybe presets that people have created. So that's another letdown there. But again, it's totally up to you to decide if that's like a big deciding factor that Serum had that this does not have. Maybe there's a way to do it, but I don't know. The next thing we have is the random, which again is just going to add randomizing to it. So if we put it on the wave table here, our frame, unipolar. Okay, so that's going to be more of a random thing. You're going to control jitter, smooth, and chaos with. This is good for like sounds, which again, you want to add a bit of ear candy into, but you don't want it to be so predictable. Then you can create a random LFO for that stuff. It's good for certain landscapes, and if you're trying to do weird stuff, weird textures in the back, or just experiment to see what comes out of it. But those are going to be some of the modulators there. We are going to have MIDI like the note, which you're going to be able to route depending on how hard someone hits, or the higher you go, the more something goes up in. We are going to have like sort of a pressure, and we are going to have access to a velocity, which again, it all has to deal with how hard you're pressing a key, a MIDI keyboard that has velocity aftertouch to it. Okay, and then from there we have the utility like max and all that, which I have yet to really understand, so I'm not going to talk about those as this is my first impression video on it, but that's how we would access some of the modulators in this synth. The effects section of Faceplant is its strongest point, in my opinion. And the reason for that is going to be due to the lane system that they have set up. So essentially, the reason I like it so much, guys, is because I can have 3 lanes. And these 3 lanes can be separate or they can feed into each other. So for instance, here we have lane 1. Let's say here I have a super saw and I want to put reverb on it. And let's say for some reason I have a sub with that super saw, which is found at the bottom of it. I can route my analog saw into lane 1 and feed the reverb, and then I can bypass that and send my wavetable, my sub, let's say, into lane 2 only. Now from here, I can make lane 1 go into lane 2 so it gets processed by those, or I can send it directly to the master bypassing that lane. Now this opens up the possibilities like crazy, because let's say that you're making a sound and you want to put reverb on the top sound, the top layer, but not on the mid layer. Now you can do it. Let's say you want to process your sub separately from the main bass on top. Now you can do it. So this is mint. This is super strong. Let's say I want to put a filter on a specific sound, like my super sub. And let's say I have a wavetable here, a vocal one, that I want to pop out a little more. And then I don't want that to get filtered. Now I bypass it there. Let's say that I want to filter it a little bit differently so that it's like 2 different filters. We can go with a ladder here at a rest. And now, again, they're separate. I have my options of doing parallel filtering where one sound can get altered by this one, the other one can't. In Serum, you couldn't do that. You had to sacrifice a bit of that. And the fact that you can do it here is a big plus, but it goes beyond the filter. It goes into distortion, EQing, and all that good stuff, and I like that a lot. I think that's where the strong point of Faceplant is, in the fact that you can do that. You can, essentially, you have the freedom to just mess around. You do have a mix knob as well, So that way you can kind of see it as a return in a way as well, so that you have the clean source. You can have half and half parallel. That is amazing, and I give them props for that. Here I can route this to the master. There's my super saw, and then here's my other sound. So again, that is a very strong feature of that. Now let's go back to what I had with just my standard super saw sound there, and look a little bit at the effects that it has to offer. So okay, so we're gonna have access to a lot of these, but the more important ones that I find people are gonna be using more religiously for basic stuff and not super crazy sound design, obviously the chorus. That's how the chorus is gonna sound like. We're gonna have access to a comb filter. It doesn't sound specifically like the one in Serum, which creates really crazy artifacts. We're gonna have a compressor. The next thing we have, guys, is distortion, which you're gonna have like about access to 5 if you just have the distortion unit. Best to use a sine wave for that just to see how it sounds like, and we're just gonna increase the drive on the overdrive. We are going to have a dynamics knob, which Serum didn't have. And the reason for the dynamics knob is just due to the fact that distortion or saturation can give you more of a compressed vibe. So if you're making something that's plucky and has a lot of dynamics to it, you would put this up to preserve that. If you don't care and you're like a dubstep head and you're like, no, it has to be fucking loud, then lower dynamic. Okay, so those are going to be some of the distortions that you have access to. Now, if you go for the big boy money, then you are going to have phase distortion, which is another form. Okay, from there, we are going to have access to other stuff like resonators. So you can add a resonator to the sound in a specific key. So I have to play high. That's essentially the sound of a resonator. Okay, the other thing we have is, again, the reverb. So we have our super saw. Okay, as we move along there, form and filter. So that sounds like a phaser in a way as well. Frequency shifter, gain, gate. We do have a chance gate, which I like. If you like into that stuff, you can do a lot with that trance gate. It's not just for trance stuff, man. Ring mod, tape stop, which is cool. And you can control the stop to do some cool stuff there if that's what you're into. Again, it's better to use that outside of Faceplant in my opinion, but it is there. It's pretty cool. We do have a transient shaper. Anything, again, we do have the limiter, which is just a compressor infinite to 1 ratio. So there's going to be no reason for sound designers to use this synth and not get sounds that sound like mixed and mastered already. However, the EQs are a bit of a letdown for me because I do not have that new EQ. I do have a Carve EQ, and again, it opens up a screen, but again, the letdown of it, similar to the LFO is that we can't really, hear the sound as we're EQing it. So I wish, again, they would change that, but again, they do have a Carve EQ, but I like the Serum EQ a lot better. We do have a 3-band EQ, so you could definitely just lower maybe the lows. Boost the highs. Okay, so 3-band EQ there, and then I don't see any other EQ, but I don't like the EQs that much. But everything else is pretty cool. Ladder filter. And you can switch between that. Okay, so that is essentially the effects section. You're going to have access to the fat trader. That's okay, but those are going to be some of the effects, guys. Now, the last thing I did forgot to mention is there is a wavetable editor inside of the synth itself in the wavetable section. If you click that knob here, you're going to be able to do, again, wavetables and start to mess with that, doing like different little points and whatnot. Again, I have not messed with this, but you can mess with that and then just, I don't know, have it there. But I'm not going to get into it just because it's something that I haven't dabbled with. But there is a wavetable editor inside of this. Again, the thing I hate about this, you cannot hear unless you click out of it. So as you're making that waveform, you're not going to be able to hear what it's actually doing. You're going to have to exit out. So that's the only thing I'm not a fan of inside of Faceplant, is that when you do have these menus open, I like them, I like the idea, but if you can please make it so that as I'm playing notes, I can move this and play notes, that would be great. And those are my first impressions of Faceplant, guys. Now, keep in mind, I am a sound designer. It's my job to make presets for you guys to utilize to make music. So the fact of the effects section being my favorite is probably due to that, is the fact that I can see myself making some big patches that I wouldn't be able to do in Serum and making them sound as best as I can, even better for you guys to utilize. So as a sound designer, I really appreciate that. Now, you as a producer, or if you're a sound designer as well, you got to ask yourself if that's something you like as well. Do you like what it does? Do you like, what it offers? Is it the same? Do you see yourself making same sounds at Serum or new ones or having more fun? Answer that question and you will answer if you should purchase it or put it on your wish list. But with that being said, guys, I did not go over the presets. I'm doing it a favor by not doing that, because there are some good ones from Rob Swire and Artifacts, but all the other ones were a little bit of a letdown for me, too overprocessed and whatnot. So I'm not going to go over them. You can watch another video on that. So there's some people that auditioned them, but I'm not going to go over that. I feel like it might put it a little bit more down. But other than that, guys, those are my first impressions. Let me know what you think of Faceplant. If you purchase it, have fun with it, and I'll catch you guys next time. You guys take care, and peace out. The last thing I did forget to mention is that we do have this video game we can play to play Space Invaders inside of the Synth. So if that's a big selling point for you, well, you can amaze your friends with this. And the only thing is that last ship at the bottom, like sticking that thing out, is a little questionable, but you know what? I wouldn't mind it. I would not mind if that touched me at all.